joining us here today. Some of you may have participated in this series that we hosted last year. So we kicked it off last year for the first time, hosting a young professional series on various topics of professionalism, networking, etc. And David was my moderator, so he is again. And whether you guys think we're a good comedy team or not, we think we're a good comedy team. So one of these days we might take this show on the road. We're just not sure yet. But with that, I am the president and CEO of San Antonio Visitor Alliance. My name is Sharon again. And David Uminski, most of you know David, but David is our moderator. And those of you that may know him from Alamo Colleges, where he is a professor of hotel and hospitality management. David has 2 associate's degrees from St. Philip's College, one in hotel management, the other in hospitality event management. He earned his bachelor's in business management from A&M University, Texas A&M, sorry. And he earned his master's in hospitality management from the University of North Texas. And I do believe last week he was virtually touring me around his new school, and he was showing me his office wall where he's holding a spot for his doctoral degree, right? So I'm like, oh my goodness, calm down with this, calm down. But anyway, David, super happy to have you be our moderator again. Before I see if David has any opening words, just a couple of housekeeping things. You are more than welcome to keep your video camera on so that we can see engagement and judge engagement. That's up to you. We do ask that if you're not speaking, you're muted. If you do have questions, you can put them in the chat or you can raise your hand. We will monitor that throughout. And so with that, David, do you have anything you'd like to open with before I introduce our guest speaker?
Thank you, Sharon. I think I'm really excited to be doing this again. We did three webinars in the fall, and it's always seemed to be right around the last Thursday or the third Thursday of the month. And you had put in, like, I guess, a repeating meeting. And so I got on Thanksgiving, it was like young professionals meeting. And I was like, no, but it's Thanksgiving though. That's cool. Like, that's really fun that reminded me about having had done these webinars. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see some new faces here, and really hope that you all find value in these webinars, and join us for the next 2, but also share the information with your friends and your colleagues. Because we're doing this in this remote setting, they don't have to be in San Antonio, they can be anywhere. And log in. And I think this information that we're going to share during these 3 webinars as we kick these off is something that you can use really in any industry, but we're going to definitely look at it through the hospitality focused lens.
Great, thanks, David. So with that, I am pleased to introduce our guest speaker. Ashley Geyer is a training and development professional who has spent the majority of her professional career in the theme park industry, working for Busch Gardens Williamsburg, SeaWorld San Antonio, and Six Flags Fiesta Texas. Ashley is the current corporate manager for training and development at Six Flags Entertainment Corporation and serves as a customer experience advisory board member for the University of Houston Bauer Business College. Over the last decade, she has spent her time in special events, culinary operations, and human resources. She holds a bachelor's degree in business from Virginia Wesleyan University and a master's of science in organizational leadership and a certificate of human resource management from Southern New Hampshire University. Her passion is simple. It is working with people to discover their potential through learning and development. Ashley, welcome. We're excited to have you here this afternoon. Before we start, do you have any opening words or anything you'd like to say to the group?
Yeah, absolutely. So while we have some great topics that we will be mentioning to you all, this is absolutely designed for you. So if you have any questions and you need us to pause or you want us to expand on a topic, please feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat. And I'm sorry if that broke the rules, Sharon, but this is absolutely meant for you. So if there's anything that we are talking about that resonates with you and you want us to touch on it a little bit more, if you have a specific question, please feel free to chime in. I'm all about you today.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. All right. So before we get started with the information that kind of Sharon and Ashley and I have talked a little bit about, I wanted to just take a quick moment because there are some people on the call that I don't recognize their names. And so if you would please unmute yourself and or type into the chat if you don't want to talk. But introduce yourself for me, please. Just tell us your name, maybe where you work, how long you've been in the hospitality industry, and maybe one of your goals that you want to accomplish in the industry. So I'm just going to go down the order that I see on my screen. So Anthony, you're up first. All right, Anthony, while you work on that, let's go move on to Greg. Greg, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Greg Peeler. As far as hospitality experience, I really have none. I spent 21 years in the Navy, retired in 2012, and have spent the majority of the time since then in Afghanistan, where I just returned in January. So I'm like, I should probably find a different career field. So since I like traveling and I do travel a lot, I thought hospitality would be a good fit. It just kind of fell into place. I was taking classes at St. Philip's. So I guess the short-term goal would just be to get my associates, then maybe a bachelor's, and still trying to figure out where my place is in the hospitality industry.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. Kayla.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kayla Clow, and I work at Andretti Indoor Karting and Games. I am the Texas regional, and I've been in the industry for the last 10 years. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Naomi.
Hi, I'm Naomi. I'm a student at St. Philip's. I'm Mr. Uminski's student, and my major is culinary arts. So I have some hospitality experience, but not a lot.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Desiree.
Hello, everybody. I actually serve on the board for Alamo Area Hospitality Association, and am currently the princess of the Riverwalk and love the hospitality industry, and currently not working in the hospitality industry, but I do work as support for the hospitality industry. So right now I'm with Citywide Facility Solutions, and we basically handle anything that a facility could need. So specifically for hospitality this past year, a lot of restaurants have had time to do some kitchen deep cleans. So we've been doing a lot of restroom and kitchen deep cleans for restaurants on and off the Riverwalk. Recently, we sanitized all the buses for the NCAA women's basketball team. So kind of working as a support for the hospitality industry right now. Prior to 2020, I did work as sales manager for all the salt grasses in San Antonio, and sales manager for the boat company. So I love David and Sharon, so I just wanted to get on and support you guys and just learn everything. One thing that I like to do is just get all the training. Even if I think I know everything, I will learn something. So thank you for putting this on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Zarelda.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Zarelda Marrero. I work in a historic hotel from downtown, the Menger Hotel. I've been in the industry for about on and off about 10 years, and I'm very excited to join this meeting today.
Excellent. Thank you. B.
Hi, my name is Beatrice Avila. I'm with SBC, and I just wanted to obtain just some information and resources for my students. Thank you.
Awesome. Excellent. Welcome. Amber?
Hello, my name is Amber McGinty. I've had about 2.5 years of experience in the front desk. So right now I'm not in the hospitality industry, but I'm really forward to looking into getting back into it. And I'm getting a certificate right now. So I'm just excited, and I'm thinking maybe I can even get an associate's or a bachelor in hospitality management. Thank you.
Awesome. Excellent. In the chat, Anthony used to be a supervisor for Phillips Entertainment. Before that, he worked in different positions in the parking industry. He graduated from UTSA in PR in 2011, and he's been out of the game because of health issues, but he's feeling better and he's looking back to come back into the industry. So excellent. Thank you so much, Anthony. And then last but not least, Nicole. I know she's driving, so she may not be able to. So that's okay. Nicole Jewell is on the phone on the call with us, and she is with AJR Media. I think I always get the initials mixed up, but AJR Media, and she sells advertisement space in Texas Highways Magazine. So Nicole, and she's also a past president of AHA, and just a wonderful wonderful person all around. So thank you all so much for everyone being here. I know that took a little bit of time, but I think it's important to, one of the reasons why we love this young professionals group is to facilitate some kind of networking. And so if you heard something from somebody today that's like, hey, I heard you say this and I'm interested in that, feel free to exchange information and reach out and contact each other outside. So thank you all so much. So today, we've kind of broken the 3 webinars into into different segments, kind of geared towards helping you develop different aspects of your professional career. And so today we're going to talk about preparing with the focus behind resume writing as well as interviewing. So raise your hand or give some kind of indication if you have a resume. There's reactions in Zoom. There's a little reactions button. Excellent. Okay, good. Very, very good. Those of you who don't have a resume, listen up, because we've got some really cool things to talk about. I personally think resumes are a little intimidating. I don't know if any of you feel the same way. You're like, oh my gosh, what information do I put on here? When I wrote my very first resume, I wrote every job I'd ever had. And I was going to give it to someone to give to the YMCA here in San Antonio to get me a job with the YMCA. And she called me back and she said, David, I know you. But if I didn't know you, I would look at your resume and I would think, what does this young man want to do with his life? Because it is all over the place. And so that's when I learned the lesson about, tailoring your resume. So I'm so glad Ashley is here to kind of talk about resume writing and interviewing skills. And again, like Ashley said, if there's a question that you have that just pops up, you can type it into the chat. I will be monitoring that. But also, if you just want to unmute yourself, if you're comfortable talking on the microphone, you're welcome to do that as well. So let's get started. So Ashley, how many resumes do you have an opportunity to kind of see on a regular basis?
Thousands. Now in this this role that I'm in, thousands of resumes I have access to. And as you know, our industry is hot right now. In terms of jobs, because we're rebuilding. And so it's exciting to see all of those resumes come in.
Awesome. So we have a list here on the screen, but what are some of the more common mistakes that you personally come across and you see?
Certainly, forgetting to even attach your resume is one that is not spelled out on here, but definitely something we see. Incorrect contact information. While you might have incorrect information listed on your resume, I need to know how to we can contact you. And so if you don't double check your email address or even phone number, that is critical so we can get a hold of you.
Okay. And so what out of this list here that you see on the screen, which one would you say maybe are like the top 3 common mistakes or the most detrimental?
Certainly. So definitely number 1, failure to tailor your resume. One thing I would love to recommend is if you have a job that you desire to apply to, print it out, or if you want to save trees, definitely copy and paste it and start highlighting the job details and tasks that you have immediate experience in. And as you begin to highlight, that will be kind of your guiding light in tailoring your resume to fit that job. Another one for me personally is if it's too long and I can't get to the point, I'm probably going to skip past because I know exactly what skills I need and what experience I need for a position. And so make sure that it is specific and to the point, because you only have a few seconds to grab that recruiter's attention. And then I would say the last one for me is really just mistakes in grammar. I get caught up on that very easily. And I want to make sure that's an easy one to do, that especially if it's a role pertaining to any sort of communication, we need to make sure that you're effective in what you're communicating. So it is very important that on your resume, that is the first sign that we look for the communication skill with.
So on that last one that you mentioned, the spelling mistakes and bad grammar, I've always heard that, when I talk about writing proposals for event planners and things like that, that if it's full of mistakes in grammar on the proposal, then if you're not paying attention to the small details on your proposal, then how are you going to pay attention to those small details that make my event successful? So is that kind of a similar mindset from a recruiter? If they see a lot of those mistakes and stuff, do they take that kind of mentality into play?
Absolutely. Remember, you're putting your best foot forward. This is the first interaction that somebody has with you. While it's typically electronic, this is the first greeting that we get to see of you. And so if you have spelling mistakes or even grammatical errors, we might be turned off by that, and because we want you to be able to communicate effectively, whether it's written or orally, with whether it's guests or internal clients. That is incredibly important.
Sharon.
Yes, because I raised my hands, right? So I just want to add a little story to this. So back in my previous life, when I would collect resumes and interview and hire folks for jobs, and this speaks to the attention to detail, this speaks to mistakes in grammar, and to that first impression, right? All the things that you're kind of touching on there, Ashley and David. So I received a resume that was on a Word template, and I'm sure these still exist, these Word templates, right? And it where in parentheses it said insert name here, right? That's where you would go into that stock template and fill in your name. This individual put their name before the parenthetical part and kept the insert name here part. So I will never forget that, always stuck with me. And I thought, you know what, here's an individual that obviously there's an attention to detail that's being missed. And I really didn't look past that point. Like I kind of rejected the resume at that point. I didn't even move on from there. So it is very important. And I'm sure, Ashley, maybe you don't have to, but do you have a story or such that you might have where you came across a resume that right away just was something that you knew this is not something, we're not going to move forward with that?
Yes, I actually have 2 examples. I'll save the best one for last. If you are attaching the incorrect resume, that is the first indication that you were not paying attention to the detail. So for example, I currently have a virtual trainer position posted. And if you are applying for a customer service representative, that title does not match a virtual trainer position. And so therefore, that's an indication to me that you didn't take the time to read the job description that I had put together and was very thoughtful in the skills and requirements for that position before I even posted. And so just be mindful of the resume that you are attaching to that posting. And probably the funniest one that I've seen was an actual Word document of somebody's dating profile that had been typed out, and that was attached in the resume field. So I'm not quite sure that our job site was the place to put your dating application in, but nonetheless, it was there. So just the lesson to that is, again, double check the attachments that you upload to a job application.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions? Those of you who have your resumes, or those of you who, don't have a resume, kind of how to get started. Any questions for Ashley?
I do, Sharon. Ashley, so in this environment, in this current environment we're living in, with many folks have been furloughed from their jobs or laid off from their jobs, and there's been a gap in employment. And now, lots of jobs are being posted, especially in the hospitality industry. How, I know at one point in time, there may have been a stigma around job gaps and job hopping. And so I'm wondering if you can kind of speak to that, and how there's kind of been an evolution to the acceptance of those types of things on a resume.
Certainly. I think it goes without saying that last year was a very difficult year. And I would even argue that the beginning of this year, right, we're not out of the water just yet. And so therefore, there is, while it's not written, right, there's an overall understanding that we need to act with grace and empathy when reviewing resumes, because we don't know what that candidate has gone through or what their story is. And so if there is a clear gap of employment, while we don't want to make assumptions, we do want to lead with empathy, and that it is okay. We are understanding of what impact COVID had on not just individuals, but companies as well. And everybody has a story. So it's an opportunity to connect with a candidate on a deeper level on what their story is.
Excellent.
And
Desert, sorry, Sharon, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the follow-up to that is about the job hopping thing. So, I feel like this is a generational conversation, and maybe I'm the senior at the table today, but there was a period of time where you would collect resumes, and it was a negative if people had worked, if they too frequently were changing jobs. And so now I feel like, there's kind of been this shift of opinion on people and their experiences and what shows up on their resume. And so I know maybe there's a fine line there. And so Ashley, can you talk about, how you look at that and how you guys perceive what is called job hopping?
Absolutely. So we know, based off of current statistical data, that the average individual stays in their position about 2 to 3 years before they move on to another opportunity, whether that is within their current organization or outside the organization. And so therefore, when we're looking at job hopping, quote unquote, we're really looking at, that 2 to 3 year time frame. Now we know that sometimes gaps might be shorter than that. And so therefore we might ask those questions, but that's on average what we're looking for is, did you hold that position 2 to 3 years, or what caused you to change? I could use myself as an example. When I moved out to Texas, I got hired as a special events representative. And within 7 months, I was promoted to the special events manager. And so sometimes businesses change too, and your titles change. And so as long as your current employer is reflecting the 2 to 3 years in maybe it's not tied to the job specifically, that's okay too. But on average, we're looking at 2 to 3 years in a position before kind of our spidey senses go out, where we want to probe some questions to understand more.
Excellent. Desiree.
Okay, so I have recently discovered that I am not detail oriented. So would you recommend that? So I guess the opposite of being detail oriented is a big picture thinker. So would you recommend putting that in the resume? And then when people ask you in an interview about your weaknesses, is that one of the things that, you know, you spin your weakness into a positive? Or do I avoid putting all that together? Because I do know that teams need big picture thinkers, but everybody is so used to putting detail oriented on their resumes when they're really not. So I guess my question is how would you approach that? And second little part is that while I was looking for jobs, I did notice that a lot of people are sending like personality assessments now more than what they did before. And looking into some of the companies that I interviewed with was culture and like symbioticism as a team is really important now. So yeah, my question is, how would we approach things that are like on a long laundry list of technical skills that in the past jobs have wanted, but really, like, I guess, how do you approach that when you know that you're not detail oriented or something like that?
Yeah, certainly. I actually think you answered your own question with the big picture thinker, if you will, because that is a skill as well. And so spin that as a positive. We all have weaknesses, and those weaknesses change over time, right? As our development continues, we fine tune our quote unquote weaknesses. I always like to change the word weaknesses to opportunities. So if you're conversing with a recruiter, you can say, well, here are my opportunities. I don't view them as weaknesses, but these are my opportunities. And just that change in vocabulary will send a signal that, hey, they're actively thinking about how they can work on their gaps as an individual. And is there anything that we as a potential employer can help in identifying and closing those gaps? In terms of the assessments, I think you're right. I mean, culture is really big these days, and they're looking for specific skills and experiences. And that's the reason why they use those assessments. Some indicators to work around that is going to be just in the job description itself, primarily in the first or second paragraph, you'll get a good indication of what type of person they're looking for, or sometimes they'll spell it out. So you'll see it later on in this presentation, but if there's a word on there that you're like, that is not me, I'm going to share with you a little tip. If you hit up the thesaurus and find another word for it, I guarantee it'll still resonate the same way. It's just not called out exactly how they wrote it on their job description.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so before we move on, I'm going to go a little off script. I'm going rogue. Sorry, Sharon. But one of the things that's on this list is poor format. Okay, and the format of the resume I think is so important. And so this is the teacher in me, we're going to jump into real quick. Anybody on the call can answer. Your resume is typically divided into major sections, right? And so what is one section that's on your resume? Anybody?
Sharon, I have education on there.
Okay, so education is one. Forgive my handwriting, I'm writing with my finger. Okay, so I see skills in the chat. Affiliations, I like that. Amber, did you have one? Sorry, I saw that you unmuted yourself.
Certifications.
Okay, certifications, awesome. I'm gonna put education and certifications kind of together because they might fall. Okay, go ahead.
Desiree's put some in the chat. So she's got job history, skills, affiliations.
Excellent. Oh my gosh, Amber, yes, the contact information. Absolutely. Okay, contact information. I'm not gonna lie, I've seen some resumes that don't have contact information. And it's like, wow. I look at this and typically, I'm not gonna say this is a general rule of thumb, but typically when there's no contact information, the rest of the resume is already kind of lackluster to begin with. But how horrible would it be if I'm like, oh my gosh, you're the perfect candidate. How do I get a hold of you? I don't know. Okay. Skills and strengths. Okay, excellent. I do like that. And so, Ashley, in your opinion, so now let's just take like these three kind of as general categories. Which one's the most important?
Hands down, I would argue it depends on the role, but either skills or job history. I would probably gear towards job history first, then skills. But the one thing I want to know about job history is that we just want the relevant experience as it pertains to that job you're applying for. If you post the relevant experience, you're going to capture the attention of the recruiter a lot faster. If skills is a super big highlight, again, you'll get a huge indication of that in the first 2 paragraphs of a job description, then you might want to highlight those first.
Okay, excellent. And one thing that I do teach, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley, I teach some of my students who don't have a job history, but they are going for culinary arts. If they're applying for a culinary or a food production position, then it might be you could have skills and also education. Because if they're a culinary arts student, that would tell the recruiter that they're not just here for a job and a paycheck, they're here because they have a passion for this. I mean, they're obviously spending time in school for that. And so do you think, is that something that would be like along the lines of information I should keep sharing with my students, or should I stop sharing that?
Certainly, I would actually expand it just a little bit further. Is what experiences did you learn in your schooling? So maybe you did recipe building or inventory management. And how are those key experiences that you were taught in school? How does that tie into the job you're applying for? Those
Awesome.
are transferable skills.
Excellent. Very good. So if you have any questions about resumes, or I'm going to go ahead and I'll type my email in the chat, and anybody is welcome to shoot me an email or a question that you have. I work with my students. I work with about 60 to 90 students a semester, helping them with their resumes. And so I am happy to take a look and help maybe revise or offer recommendations with that. So really quickly, we have our resume page. Of course, we have our header, which has our contact info. Can you talk, while I write this, Ashley, can you talk a little bit about email addresses for me, please?
Yes. Remember, you're sending the brand of you as an individual. And so I'm really sorry. My dogs are barking.
That's
so please make sure that your email address is appropriate. I'll share with you one I recently received this week, and it literally was in all capital letters. This is spam@hotmail.com with only one S though, so it didn't get blocked. And if I see that, I'm not going to be able to take you seriously. So I really want to know who it is that's reaching out to me so I can quickly find you. So typically, any combination of your name is absolutely acceptable and preferred.
awesome. And so then just kind of a quick, brief rundown for those of you who do not have resumes. If you're doing your job history, you're going to do your newest one first, like the most recent, and then you go down to the oldest job. Okay. Now, Ashley, when you talk about doing relevant job history, some of your jobs may not be relevant. And so if you exclude them, it's going to look like, do you have a gap? So is that something that you could explain maybe in the cover letter, or explain maybe somewhere else, or how would you address that?
Absolutely. So I actually would break up where it says relevant job history, what you see on your screen right now, I would break it up into 2 header sections. So the first one would say relevant job experience, and then the second one would just be job history. And so under the job history is where you would list in order, date order, of the positions that you held. So therefore, it would clearly identify that you actually didn't have a gap in employment. And if you did, that's okay. We'll talk about where that fits in as well. And then in the relevant job experience, that's where you're going to touch on the key experiences that relate to that position. So, and that's okay if you don't have both, but it absolutely is recommended.
So that way your job history is just one liner for each job, the title, the position you held, the dates you were there, one after another. And then the relevant is where then you're going to expand and use bullet statements to say what you did at each job.
You got it.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And that touches on the other thing real quick for skills. I think bullet statements are much easier to read. That goes for the job history and the relevant job experience as well. Bullet statements are much easier to read than paragraphs. Like Ashley said earlier, you've got seconds to catch someone's attention. And the really cool thing is if you use that job description, like Ashley mentioned before, you can almost find those skills listed in the job description. You're like, oh, they're asking for these skills. I have this one, this one. Copy and paste it right into your resume. Okay. And then education is the same thing. The newest one goes on top and then the oldest one on the bottom. Ashley, how many years after you graduate from high school do you think it's appropriate to drop your high school from your education?
That is a fantastic question. I honestly would say 4 years or more. I don't know that it's relevant today. I find more value in you listing any sort of certificates, or maybe you just attended a course because you were just interested in attending a course on Excel. And that's okay too. I'd rather list that than have you list your high school.
Okay, awesome. I like that. All right, so I know we spent a little bit more time than we wanted to on that slide. So cover letters, references, and recommendations. So for cover letters, Anthony asked a question in the chat about, do you putting brief health info on the issue and issues with health info on your resume, would that help explain gaps in employment? I was thinking maybe the cover letter might be a great way to address that. So how would you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. And without getting into the details, because everybody's situation is different, I'm going to use an example that I have seen. If you are caring for a loved one, for example, that is their desire is to be at home, you can absolutely touch on that in your cover letter. And it doesn't have to be lengthy, just, from this date to this date, I was a full-time caregiver, and that's all you need to say. That will paint a very clear and direct picture to the recruiter that's reviewing your resume. No need to probe on that. Another thing, because I know we do have some, I'm going to call them second career folks on today's session. And I think it's important that if you're potentially a military spouse and your significant other had an assignment overseas and the job was not available, that's 100% okay to also list in your cover letter. One could argue that really cover letters are dying these days, but those are two really good examples on when a cover letter would absolutely be relevant. And then of course, if you're applying for any executive position, a cover letter is also important.
Excellent, thank you. And if you look at the example of the cover letter we have here, even in the very, very small print, right, you see the bullet statements. And that, again, it is much easier to read. They stand out, so that important information, using those bullet statements is really key. As far as references and asking for recommendations, so what are some guidelines for somebody who has never asked somebody to be a reference before? Like they're trying to now find people to be references. Who should they be looking to? And how do they go about asking someone to be a reference?
Great question. So educators is a good start. Any peers that maybe you worked on a project with would be another good place. And a mentor, if you had a mentor that you looked up to, that's another good place to start. As you continue your journey and your career, you will find that there are people who assisted you along the way, those are another great resource to help. I try to refrain from any personal references unless the position requires that. So for example, when you're applying for maybe law enforcement, which isn't applicable for hospitality, but it could be if it's in loss prevention in a hotel setting or security for a theme park, it could be. They sometimes would ask for a personal reference depending on the check, but primarily we're going to be looking for any sort of peer or supervisor or mentor type of relationship. And you can always start off instead of saying, hey, can you write me a recommendation on this position? You could just say, hey, could you just write me a letter of recommendation on my character? Your character is super telling in how you're going to be and fitting in the culture of the organization that you're applying for.
Awesome. And so I think it's important to make sure that if you've never asked someone to be a reference, that you give them a heads up in advance. Like you don't just put their name down. You always should ask for the permission, just like that we see here on the slide. I think asking permission is the key, because you don't want that business to call that person and then be surprised that you have listed them as a reference.
Hey, David.
Yes, Ashley.
Sorry, Sharon.
Or sorry, Sharon.
I wanted to chime in real quick. A thought I had on that. I should have raised my hand. I'm so rude. I would add, because I am somebody who is, people frequently reach out to me that have worked for me in the past who ask me for a reference. Hey, can I use you for a reference? And sometimes it's just that short. And while in most cases I do say yes, what I would like to know on the front end, and so this is just food for thought for the folks on the session, is tell me who you're applying for. Tell me which like, okay, I've had people who worked for me in a capacity where they were a sound engineer, but now they're going to be in the police academy. So it'd be good for me to know ahead of time, what are you applying for? What positions are you applying for? So I can kind of get it in my head that when somebody reaches out to me for that reference, I know how I might tailor my response, because that works on that side of the coin too, right, Ashley?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And keep in mind, it goes beyond just the ask, right? If you have a bank of references, if you will, it is a constant reminder every time that you're updating your resume to reach back out to those people you listed as your reference and just check in with them. It's great from a networking standpoint, and it's a really good tool to have in your back pocket.
Okay, so that then I guess leads me to another question. Should you list references directly on your resume, or do you do the standard references upon request?
I personally like the references upon request. If it specifically asks in the job description or even application process, then that is when you need to submit it. But if it doesn't ask, you can just put it at the end of your resume, references upon request, or depending on your application submission method, there might be a section in there saying, do you have references? Check a box, yes or no. Definitely worth notating, especially it comes in handy when, let's say, you might be a top candidate and they're looking who's going to make the best cultural fit, because side to side from a skills and experience, they're equal. And so that reference might be helpful in making that final decision.
Excellent. Naomi.
Yes, I have a quick question about how a recommendation versus the reference. So on the resume, would you actually want someone to list just the name and number of their references, or would you want a letter of recommendation? Or are those two different things?
That is a great question. So they are two different things. A letter of recommendation is essentially, I'm going to give you an example. I, Ashley, am vouching Naomi. She has been an excellent student. These are the milestones she achieved in my class. I recommend her for this position. Where references are, they can do a character reference, they could do job There's just a variety of different ways in which we obtain that information, and it is more supplemental. So where a recommendation is more proactive, and you typically see that in the educational setting. So maybe when you apply to college, or maybe you're looking to be a professor of some sort, letters of recommendation, that is something that is submitted ahead of time, where references typically are kind of later on in the process, if that makes sense.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Naomi,
Sure
I
thing.
actually had that exact same question I was going to ask. So thanks for asking that. That was awesome. Great minds think alike. One thing I will say too about letters of recommendation, this is just me from a personal experience, is that when you are asking someone for a letter of recommendation, it is important that you give them ample time to do that. I remember I actually sprung a letter of recommendation on Sharon, and she got one to me in less than 24 hours. And
because I love you.
Thank you. But that traditionally is not what you want, because you don't want that person you're writing, that's obviously writing a letter for you. They're taking time out of their schedule to do that. And so you want to give them ample time, make sure they know when the deadline is and what the submission process is. If they need to send it back to you, or if they need to submit it somewhere else. One thing that I learned in a job that I used to be when I worked up in Maine, is that if they have to actually mail the letter of recommendation, then you should provide a self-addressed stamped envelope. So make it as easy as possible for someone to write that letter of recommendation for you. Any other questions or comments or concerns about letters of recommendation, cover letters, or references?
David, I just did want to give you a time check that we've got about 13 minutes.
I know, I was just looking at that. So we're gonna try to move along. The last time we did an hour and 15 minutes and it went by, and I don't know why we chose to do an hour. If you do need to drop off at 5:30, we get it. But if you're able to, and we're continuing going, if you want to, feel free to hang on. We probably won't go longer than 5:45. But so do's and don'ts for interviews. So we're moving on. You've got called to come in for an interview. Do's and do nots. Ashley, what are your biggest do's and do nots from the interview perspective?
Certainly. Do look up mission, vision, and values if available on the company site, and take it one step further. I don't need you to recite them to me. Well, that is nice. I want to know which one resonated with you the most and how you believe you can contribute to that. That is what we are looking for. So that goes along the lines of do your homework. But it's very important to take a look at what their mission, vision, and values are. And remember, it's a mutual process. And so while we are looking for a candidate, you also are interviewing us. Is this a good fit with me or for me? And so if you are doing that homework ahead of time, you will get a good understanding of what they believe in, and if it's aligned with your own individual beliefs as well. Another thing I would say is any interaction could be the start of your interview. So just be mindful that when you have somebody that's opening the door for you because you're entering in a building, that could be an interview. Somebody who is greeting you at the front desk, that could be an interview. So just be mindful of the different checkpoints throughout your process in which it's not a formal interview, but it could be a part of the interview process. And then the other thing I would want to call out here, and we touched on it earlier, is really focus on what it is that you yourself can contribute to the organization. Forget about all the other people who may or may not have applied, or what the desired skill set you think that person wants. Be you, be authentic, and sell yourself.
Awesome. And so what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen or you've experienced in the interview process?
First and foremost, as much as we love them, it's these things right here. It's our cell phones. These people are cutting out time in their day just as much as you're cutting out time in your day to connect with them. while we are so connected to our electronic devices, it is incredibly important that we put them on silent, just so we can give undivided attention. And that goes both ways, right? That goes for the interviewer and the interviewee. That's just to be respectful. The other thing I would say is, really dress to impress. And I'm not saying get a blazer or a jacket. You'll get a good indication of what the culture is based off of their company website or on their careers page. You will see an example of what their team members look like or their employees look like. And that will give you a good understanding of, is it more relaxed? Should I go into this interview a little bit more relaxed, or do I need to put on business attire? And we want you to be yourself. So if a suit and tie is not you, that's okay. Why don't you find something else that's a little bit more fitting, that's aligned with what you have seen on their website.
Awesome. And I like that you mentioned from both perspectives. I work with a recruiter from Whataburger to do mock interviews with my students here at St. Philip's. And she mentioned that recently something that she learned about herself is that she has to take her watch off because her watch is connected to her phone, and she was constantly checking her watch. And she didn't realize in this remote setting of doing virtual interviews how her looking down might make the other person feel like they need to rush or they need to kind of continue and move faster, like she's checking her watch. But really it's just a buzz, and it's just natural habit. When you feel a buzz, you just look down. And so she even takes her watch off completely for interviews. So I thought that was something really cool, and also that you just touched on. Anybody have any questions about interviews?
The one thing I'll add while folks are potentially typing in their questions is that, especially in the remote world, pausing to really collect your thoughts on how you're going to respond it's okay. And we actually expect that. So while it may seem awkward as an interviewer, we expect that, and it's okay to collect your thoughts because we want to make sure that you are providing the best response to our question. So while it's not on this list, I do think it's important to note.
Awesome. All right. So behavioral questions and the interview structure. So these are becoming more and more common instead of like the standard list of questions that you would get at an interview. So how can people identify what a behavioral situation question is, and what's the best way to answer those?
Yeah, so any behavioral question those tell me about a time when, or can you describe a situation that. And so what we're looking for is really, what was the situation? What was the behavior of both maybe yourself or those individuals that were involved in that scenario? It's really important to touch on those as well. And what was the outcome? Whether it was good or bad, or maybe it didn't really resolve in much, but there was a key learning that you learned from that particular scenario. So one tip I always like to share is anytime that you go into an interview, bring a notebook and a pen, and at the corner type in SBO, or on here, we're going to touch on this in a little bit, STAR. Those are going to help you. So when you are thinking of your response, you're going to be able to look down at your paper and say, okay, situation. And then you're going to talk about the situation. And then you're going to look down again and you're going to say, oh, behavior. Okay, let me share the behavior. And then finally, outcome. You'll see that, oh, outcome. What is the outcome? I have done that in every single interview that I've done. And I like to think that it helps me, especially when my nerves get to me. It'll just help calm me down that, okay, this is the structure that I need to take to answer the question.
Awesome. And so you just touched on the STAR interview. Situation and task kind of are bundled up into that situation. And then action is the equivalent of the behavior, and then result is the outcome. So you can use either one of those, SBO or STAR. I like those as well. Totally random question. What if you have sweaty palms and you have to shake someone's hand? Like, how do you, what do you do? Like, if you're nervous, like how do you overcome that, or what's something that you can recommend doing for someone that gets that way when they're stressed and then they have to shake someone's hand?
Go all in, commit to it. That's expected. We know that the interview process is super nerve-wracking. And while we're not shaking many hands these days, definitely go all in. If somebody extends that opportunity, again, that's just another touch point for you to make it memorable, regardless if you have sweaty palms or not. We all get them. And to be honest with you, we're probably not going to dwell on that. What really matters is how you carried yourself, how you answered the questions, how you sold yourself. That's what really matters.
Awesome. Any other questions about interviewing? Let me look in the chat. I don't see anything in the chat. All right, and so talk to us a little bit about the technical based questions, because we have the behavioral and then we have the technical.
Yeah, so technical is going to be job specific related. So maybe on the job description, there was questions on years of experience, or do you have direct experience doing this task? Maybe it's systems oriented. What kind of systems are you familiar with? And so all of those would be listed on the job description. If you carry that job description with you, you can put it right next to kind of that situation, behavior, outcome. So it's a good checks and balances of, okay, they're probably going to ask me these questions on the technical skills. Nobody ever said, no, you couldn't have that as a part of the interview process. Again, it's really just to help structure your thoughts when those questions are asked.
Okay, awesome. All right, so now this is something that especially people who are going into a second career, transferring and tailoring their experiences. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to really just a personal experience. My husband, he's former military, and when he was applying for leadership positions, he had what felt like a 10-page resume. It was probably more around the 5 to 6 range, but it was incredibly long. But a lot of the experience he had was transferable skills. He was an armorer within the United States Marine Corps, and he would specifically iron out what tasks were associated with that role. And it took us a very long time to kind of iron that out. And so I'm just going to use that as an example. As an armorer, there's a lot of inventory that needs to happen. And so therefore, inventory translated into the skill that he was applying for, which was in a food and beverage position. And inventory management and control was something that was a direct responsibility associated with that position. And so kind of scale it back a little bit. If you are transferring, like, again, I moved from culinary operations into HR. And so I was really focused in on what are the skills that I have that can contribute to this environment. Employee relations. Did I problem solve and assisting in employee issues while I was managing an area? Yes. So I can put that down, right? That's a transferable skill. Did I coach and train people in my unit? I did. So let's expand on that a little bit further. And how does that relate into this job description that I'm applying for? And when in doubt, always ask a second opinion. So if you have a good mentor or friend who can help you kind of see through the former job duties that you once did and the job that you're aspiring to apply to, 9 times out of 10, they'll be a really good resource to say, actually, you do have those skills, and here is how we translate them.
Awesome. And I love this quote: successfully navigating the industry change during the course of your career is to take full advantage of your transferable skills, those finely honed abilities that you've acquired thus far in your professional experience that you can put to good use in the next industry you work for. And I think that's also very, it's very common with our industry. I've often heard that our industry, hospitality, is a springboard industry, right? So people learn those skills of communication, of the soft skills. They learn the how to handle conflict, how to handle someone who's an upset customer. All those things they learn, and then they go off and they're doing that while they're in college and they're working through school, and then they go off into their careers. But those skills are transferable, and so I think it's really important to be able to identify what your skills are, and then bring that back to, if you are, thinking about getting a job in hospitality, or if you're moving from one thing to another. Our industry, one thing I love so much about hospitality is that I used to be an event planner, and if I ever got tired of planning events, then I could go and learn how to be a DJ, or I could go and learn to be a florist, and I could still use all those skills that I learned in the event industry, but in my new role. And so I think the same thing happens in our industry, right? I mean, if you're at the front of the house server, you can take those skills anywhere. If you're a front desk agent at a hotel, you can take those skills anywhere across the world. I think that's something I absolutely love about our industry. I love this, Ashley. You were talking about, in our pre-discussion, you talked about control your destiny. And so Sharon, this is for you. I don't think we can play too much of that if we're going to put this on YouTube.
Oh yeah, it'll get flagged. You'll have to take the soundbite off of there. But control your destiny. Look at Beyonce. She said,
Ashley,
okay, Destiny's Child, I'm gonna be my own thing.
Exactly. So Ashley, what is your advice on this idea of control your destiny?
Absolutely. I would not be sitting in front of you today if it weren't for advocating for myself on what it is that I wanted to be. And I took it in bite-sized pieces. So once you obtain your first career, is there something in there that you say, hey, you know what? I aspire to be this. And so I'll use myself, for example. When I came out of college and I got my first full-time job as that special events rep, I made it incredibly clear that I wanted to be in training and development. That was my passion. And that if there was ever a discussion or a job opportunity for me to get into training and development, sign me up, I wanted it. And while I was in that special events role, I was constantly working with a lot of peers in saying, okay, I think by picking up this project or inserting myself and just raising my hand to say, hey, listen, I want to try that, I can get the skill to be able to develop a SOP or a standard operating procedure. I'm going to need that when I want to be that training and development. And so over time, I was constantly going to my bosses saying, I would like to be on that project. I want to hand in this, because I knew that it would develop my skill set for that job I was aspiring later on. And that's okay if it changes. Through your experience and learnings, your kind of compass is going to change a little bit, and that's okay. Constantly communicate to those you surround yourself with who do have the tools available to you to contribute to your individual development. And that might be internally or externally. If you just continue to raise your hand and say, I would like to learn, that's the first step. And so when we say control your destiny, be vocal, be upfront and honest, because you will get far if you start off on that foot.
Awesome. Yeah, I personally, I don't know if you ask any really industry professionals, been going at it for a while, I would not be where I am today without the network that I've built. I would not be where I am today for the opportunities. I've told Sharon this on multiple occasions, that oftentimes when I go, I sit on the board of directors as an ex officio member for SALA as well as the Visitor Alliance. And oftentimes I feel very unprepared or I don't want to say unworthy, but I just don't feel like I belong there. But the fact that I'm sitting there, I'm going to pick up and I'm going to hear something in that meeting that's going to help me be a better industry professional down the road. So the fact that I'm sitting there is going to help me improve my professionalism and my ability to be an industry professional later on in my career. And so I would not be where I am today had I not been a president of the Alamo Area Hospitality Association. And I would never have been the president if somebody didn't say, hey, why don't you be a board member? And I was like, board members are for old people. I'm still in my 20s. I can't be a board member. And then fast forward, 3 years later, I'm the president of the association. And so it really you just never know. And so I love that control your destiny and put yourself into situations, be deliberate in what you do to help you be successful.
Can I
So,
just add on that for a
course.
second? The only other thing I would add is the people that hire you, they see something in you that you might not see in yourself just yet. And they have an investment in your own growth and development. And so lean on them. Lean on them to get to where you want to be. I have worked for some amazing people, and they are the reason why I'm in front of you today, because they helped me achieve my dreams. But it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't intentional with what it is I wanted to be.
Awesome. Thank you. So I will, Sharon and I will coordinate. We will get these resources and any link that we had throughout the presentation. We will get those to you via email. So we'll just forward those on to you for any resources that that can help you prepare your resume better, or also even in the interviewing process. So next up, May 20th is going to be our presentation in our webinar on professionalism. And so we're going to be looking at our soft skills. Katrina Reyna is the HR director at the Canopy by Hilton. It opens up next week on Thursday, which is really exciting.
Click next.
Travis,
Click next,
what's that?
David. Click next. I think there's an animation. I think the name shows up.
Oh, okay, awesome. Travis Wiest, his family owns and operates the Natural Bridge Caverns. And then Jennifer Lemus is the HR director at the Omni La Monción and Macara Hotel and Spa. And so we're really excited to have them come and talk to us a little bit about developing soft skills, because we talk about those technical skills that are necessary to do the job. There's also those soft skills that can be learned as well. And then June 17th, we're going to have Nicole Jewell join us. Michelle Matson is the president, CEO of the San Antonio Hotel Lodging Association, and Davis Phillips. His family owns and operates multiple entertainment things, like across from the Alamo, the Guinness Book of World Records, the Mirror Maze, the Haunted Adventure. And then they also have escape rooms. But Davis Phillips with Phillips Entertainment will be speaking with us on June 17th. So feel free to sign up for all three of them. This Zoom link will remain the same, so you don't have to try to find the Zoom link later on. It's not going to change. It's the same thing. And so we are looking forward. And please tell your friends, tell your coworkers, your colleagues about this if you found some value in it. And just give us some feedback on that. So any questions, comments, or concerns before we end the session today? I see there's something in the chat.
I know we are a few seconds over, but you know what, Ashley, when you and I and David met last week, kind of talked through the subject material, et cetera, there was something you talked about that I'm not sure you touched on today. And I wonder, could you also talk, I mean, this has been very the employee centered side of everything, right? So we've been very much talking about how what you as a potential employee need to do. There was something you talked about when we talked last week about career mapping, about as the employer, I had never even heard that term. So it was actually, I was very excited to hear something like that. And so just to kind of tell our folks on the line, there's more to the moment of you sitting there and interviewing for XYZ job, and how that person you're interviewing with might be thinking even how 4, 5, 6 years down the road where you end up.
Yeah, so career mapping essentially is taking a position and think of it as a network, right? So you have this position and there's little branches that come out of this position, and they're really just tracks. So if I hire you, I'm going to use a relevant experience for a ride operator, right, at Six Flags. I can take a look at that position and what skills will those individuals obtain, and what tracks can we potentially put them on for their own development? Could be a leadership track, and it could be a track into, another operations section, right? Or it could be a ride mechanic, because maybe they like to tinker with things, and that is something we discover once you're in that role, is what skill sets do they have and what can we teach them so we can put them on the right track that will suit them. And so this is something that a lot of organizations are doing, and most have been doing them, but there's a huge focus on, okay, so once we get the right candidate in place, now what? Now what do we do with them? And that is career mapping, is what avenues can we put in front of them to say, okay, you are this position, and here's where you can head if you would like to. Is there a track of interest? If so, we're going to outline the key experiences and learning that you need to be able to attain that next job. So while we're hiring you for this position, we're actually looking at, can you fit the needs of an elevated position that's ahead of that?
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? All right, so we do kind of this kind of round robin thing that I've done at the last couple webinars. I know we are a little over, but I would like, if you want to type in the chat, you can, or you can unmute your mic. I'd like you to share at least one piece of information that you gained or that was most surprising from the webinar today. So feel free to type your answer in the chat, or if you'd like, you can just unmute yourself. Not everybody at once. Tailoring the resume. Okay, excellent. Good. Thank you, Greg. I learned kind of along that same lines, I learned about doing the difference of the relevant experience and their total job history. I like that. Excellent, Naomi. Thank you so much. Please tell your friends and classmates and colleagues and everybody, even your family, come and join us for the next webinars. SBO, excellent. And I do like that job mapping insight. Yes, proofread your resume. Absolutely.
Don't send your dating information to your prospective employer.
Yes. That's awesome.
The only other thing I would add is, please don't be a stranger. I am open to connect on LinkedIn, so please find me. My name is Ashley Geyer, just as you see it today. Well, it's really a Geyer that you see today, but happy to connect on LinkedIn. This was our first touch point, and if there's any questions whatsoever that you may have, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Ashley. And I'm so happy that we're getting back into these webinars. Like I admit, we did them in the fall, and then in October and November we didn't do them, and it would pop up as an announcement on my calendar that, hey, we have this, and I'm like, no, we don't have this, but I want to get back to it. So thank you so much for being our first one here in the spring. And those of you who joined the call, if even looking at the topics that are coming up, if you have specific questions about those topics, feel free to respond to Sharon. You have her email address, and we can make sure we include those with our next webinars. So Sharon, thank you so much. Any final thoughts or final words, Sharon?
Nope. Thank you to you. Thanks, Ashley. I appreciate the dogs joining in for part of the meeting, because that, we're human, right? And just thanks to everyone who joined and spent a little bit of time with us. And maybe, some of the stuff was new information. Maybe some of it was stuff you already knew. I always find that I try and find opportunity to take away something from each conversation. So hopefully you were able to as well. If you notice, today's guest speaker was one person. The next two sessions actually have 3 people. And so that format might shift and change a little bit more. And it might be much more quick, sort of like a Q&A rapid fire kind of thing, because we will have a lot to get through, and we'll have 3 different people that are sharing their thoughts on that. So definitely poised to be a very charged afternoon when we get to May.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.